Okay guys, this is an additional urinary model that we have, and I'm going to go over it, and this will be a bonus for your lab practical. Okay, so we have this kidney here. You can see the kidney, and you can also see the adrenal gland sitting on top of the kidneys with a nice adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. But let's look at the kidney. Okay, on the outside of the kidney, you do have a renal capsule. Okay, we do talk about the renal cortex. The cortex is the outer layer, and then this inside is the renal medulla, all in the renal medulla. Again, the indentation of the kidney is called the hilum, where you have things entering and exiting the kidney. So you can see the renal artery, the renal vein, but you can also see the renal pelvis. Okay, as far as blood goes, we are reviewing, so this would be the renal artery. You have the segmental artery, the interlobar artery, the arcuate artery, and then coming off the arcuate artery would be your interlobular arteries. Okay, it would drain then through the interlobular vein. It would go to the arcuate vein, the interlobar vein, and then out to the renal vein. With urine production, we would talk about all the nephrons. Again, there's two different types of nephrons, but blood flow would go in through the renal artery, the segmental artery, the interlobar artery, and to the interlobular artery, where it would go to a renal corpuscle, which includes a capsule and a special capillary called the glomerulus, where urine is going to be produced. If we were looking at the capillary beds, these in the cortex are called peritubular capillaries, and then the ones in the medulla are called vasa recta capillaries. Now, but back to urine. From the renal corpuscle, urine flow is going to exit through the proximal convoluted tubule, down the descending limb of loop of Henle, to the ascending limb of loop of Henle, to the distal convoluted tubule, to the collecting duct, which is found in the renal medulla, to the papillary duct, to the renal papilla. So the renal papilla, you can see it really well right here. It's this tissue that is at the tip of the renal pyramid, and it drains into the minor calyx or calyces. There are several of those. The minor calyx is going to drain into the major calyx, and the major calyx drains into the renal pelvis, which then is going to collect all the urine, and it's going to drain down the ureter. There's a couple of interesting things here that you can see. This is the top of the renal pyramid, where you can see the arcuate arteries. Here is some fat that collects in between. So that is basically an overview. Now we're going to zoom in on the renal pyramid and the renal cortex and look at some of the same things that we looked at. So this right here would be the segmental artery, which is then going to go to the interlobar artery and the arcuate artery, and then coming off the interarcuate artery is the interlobular artery. It would go into the afferent arteriole. It goes through the renal corpuscle to the efferent arteriole, so this would be your peritubular capillary bed, out the interlobular vein, to the arcuate vein, to the interlobar vein, and out towards the renal vein. If we looked at the same blood vessels, you can see the vasa recta. The vasa recta has the straight venule and the straight arteriole, and this is your vasa recta. When looking at the nephrons, you do have two types of nephrons. You have your cortical nephrons, which are primarily in the cortex. They're probably a little bit shorter than this, but that would be your cortical nephron. And then the nephrons that are in the medulla that dip really down and far into the medulla, that's juxtamedullary nephrons. So when draining urine, urine is going to be filtered at the renal corpuscle, which is number 17. But if you took the renal corpuscle apart, you can see it's composed of two things: the glomerulus, which filters the blood, and then the capsule, which collects all the urine. So the urine drains through the proximal convoluted tubule, down the descending limb of the loop of Henle, to the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, to the distal convoluted tubule, to the collecting duct. Down the collecting duct, it would be the papillary duct to the renal papilla to the minor calyx. Okay, one more. This right here is a renal corpuscle. The renal corpuscle includes the renal capsule, which is sometimes known as Bowman's capsule. And inside of it, we have leaky capillary beds called the glomerulus. Now, this is what's the most important thing that's going to filter out your blood, and your urine is going to be produced. So we have fluid that collects in the renal corpuscle and by this capsule, and it drains into the proximal convoluted tubule. It goes through the loop of Henle, and eventually it's going to return into your distal convoluted tubule, which is here. Now, anything that's not filtered out is going to exit through your arterioles. So your glomerulus is connected by two arterioles. A afferent arteriole is how it arrives to the glomerulus, and then efferent arteriole is how it exits. Now, there are two structures to note here. The cells that are by the distal convoluted tubula are called macula densa, and the cells that are located just next to the glomerulus are called juxtaglomerular cells, and these two cells are very important for producing things such as renin, or detecting that there's changes in your blood that's going to run the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system.